Whether you're looking to land your next promotion, make a career transition, or find the next best role for you, being a job candidate can be challenging.
And even sometimes isolating, but you don't have to do it alone.
I'm Karen Weeks, the CEO and Chief Career Coach of Shine at Work Coaching. I bring over 20 years of HR experience to the conversation, including as the Chief People Officer at Order Groove.
And I'm Dan Carr, a Shine at Work career coach with over a decade of recruiting experience, helping high-growth startups expand with top talent.
On this podcast, we will shine a light on your job search so you can land a role that lets you flex your strengths and progress your career in an environment you actually look forward to working in each day.
From creating a standout resume, to confidently negotiating your salary, to find your footing as a new manager, you can expect to hear actionable advice to help you shine your brightest in your role.
This is the Shine at Work podcast. Welcome to another episode of Shine at Work. I am Karen Weeks, and as always, I'm here with my amazing friend and partner, Dan. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you as well. I can't believe I'm about to say this. We're about to wrap up the season. We are about to hit episode 100. I cannot believe how this has all played out over the last few years.
Time flies by, but really exciting. We're doing episode 100 next week, or
in theory, yeah, it might
theory.
be, as we have seen throughout the summer, where there may be a week in between, but yes, this is episode 99. So episode 100 will be coming up in the next week or so.
Even though I do think we should have started the count over when I joined you, but splitting hairs, we can call it 100 if you like.
We can do like V2.1 or something like that.
There should be an asterisk, is all I'm asking.
Well, and so we host these on a platform called Buzzsprout. And because I did like a welcome video and then maybe I did a trailer or something like that, it actually congratulated me on our 100th episode 2 episodes ago. I was like, no, doesn't count. Well, and we actually have some really special things coming up for the 100th episode. We have some special guests coming back and sharing some thoughts with the audience. Ironically, just today, I talked to my very first guest. She and I had just a touch base, and we were joking about how much has changed over the 3 years since we did that first episode. So it's going to be very exciting. So a little bit of a teaser for what's to come.
Buckle up.
That's right. What's going to happen after that? Who knows? But we know episode 100 is going to be cool. So today we actually wanted to kind of take a step back and really condense some of the things that we've been talking about. And this is literally how we kick off almost every engagement with our clients is 5 things to do to kick off your job search. So if you've made the decision to take the leap and move on to something else, there are 5 key things that we work with to really have you start off strong, both from a confidence standpoint, from a I know where I'm going standpoint, to a this is how I'm going to tell my story, and like really leaning into the job search so you feel like you're gaining some ground early on. So that's what we're going to start with today. Dan, anything else to tease or anything before we get started?
No, I mean, just along those lines, I think the other thing which we'll dive into here is all those things, making sure that you feel like you've got a really good foundation or jumping off point, but also it's an opportunity to put yourself in the driver's seat. We talk to and work with so many clients that are at a point in their career where they're sort of taking a step back and realizing, hey, I've never really intentionally thought about the types of companies I want to work for or the impact I want to make with the mission or the product of a company. So it's also a really good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I was actually working with someone last week on their why statement because that was then helping them write their cover letter. It was helping them figure out what kind of companies they wanted to work for. So taking that step back is really important. And that's actually what prompted some of this is that, look, you can apply to any job out there if you need to. And actually we should say and pause for a minute. Sometimes you are in a stage in your life where you just need a job. And it doesn't matter where it is, it doesn't matter whatever. And that's totally reasonable, totally understandable, zero judgment. If you've got the time, if you have the flexibility, if you've got the moment in your life to think a little bit more about these things and be a little more strategic in it, that's the moment. Although honestly, some of these apply to even just getting any job because you still want to be strong in your job search, even if you just will take the first thing that comes along.
Yep, 1000%. I think it is, even if you are in that position where you just have to find the next thing and pay the bills, it is a point to take a step back and be like, okay, how do I get back in control of this in 2 years?
Mm.
So be thinking about, if I join this company, what will this role give me, and what will this be a launching point for in my future? So there's always sort of thinking a little further down the road too, can be a part of this process, even if you just have to take what's next.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I like what you said about it makes you feel like you're a little more in control. Sometimes when you're in those moments, you're feeling a little frantic. And so even
Hmm.
if in that moment you're feeling that way, if you're still thinking a little bit down the line, it will help you feel like, okay, I still made this choice with purpose, even if in the moment it was also because I had to pay my rent that month.
Exactly. If you can always add in a little bit of the bigger picture and how it's playing into that, it'll certainly help you
Yeah.
in the decision making process.
Awesome. So we've actually kind of naturally gotten to step one, but the first thing that we really recommend to people is identify the companies you want to target and why. And so, Dan, I know this is something that you do with a lot of our clients. Talk a little bit more about why this part is important and how to think about it a little bit more.
It's important from several different ways of taking a step back and thinking about what type of companies or work resonate with you. Is it a company mission? Is it the particular product that they're putting out there? Is it the culture of a company? Finding something that actually resonates with you from a genuine standpoint is going to make you that much more excited about a role that you're diving into and starting off in that role. But it's also going to help in the application process. Like you're talking about, if you can be starting cover letters off by talking about why this company is particularly interesting to you, aside from just the standard sort of, oh, I was so happy to see this position open, always wanted to work for this company. No, if you can come across with a message of like, this product and mission really speaks to me. Let me give you a little anecdote of why, and start your application process off that, and then be able to speak to that in interviews. It's going to make that process a whole lot easier. So from the initial, like, going through the pains of applying to positions, it will ease that process. And then again, joining a position or a company where you're actually excited about what they're doing and what the impact is and where you're pouring all your blood, sweat, and tears, it's just going to be such um, more of a rewarding experience for you if you can go through that process.
Yeah, and I think, we talked about this in the episode about, you think you want to join a startup. It's also thinking about those different stages as well as a company. So,
Hmm.
kind of going back to the what companies and why, maybe it's not industry related. Maybe it is more like I want to work at a startup. I want to work at a bigger company, and that could be one of the pieces as well. So it really gives you the
Hmm.
opportunity to really think about what is going to be important to me and what companies represent that.
Yeah, and it's always good to, again, if you have the time, to start by just casting the net wide of
Mhm.
being like, these three or four industries really speak to me, or I think they speak to me. Do a little bit of research. Say what's happening with companies in the ed tech world or in
Mhm.
the fintech world, like who's new and exciting that are doing innovative things, and dive into some of those lists. Read a little bit about those companies and start to suss out and screen through what's out there, who's doing what, and what might particularly resonate with you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna steal one of your suggestions that you always give is if the product or the service is something that's important to you, what products and services do you use and you
Hmm.
like and, that or you tend to follow in the news or whatever, and that's another place to think about like, I don't know, I literally have this candle from this woman-owned local business. If that's something that's important to me, maybe I should look at those sort of companies.
Hmm. Yep, absolutely. Or if you can tie one of your passions or your hobbies in life into
Mm.
a company or product or mission, like there's companies out there that do those things. I'm working with a client that's been, in their particular industry for 15 years, and we've been going through this process of drilling down, and we finally got to something where, the words that came out of his mouth were like, when I talk about this, I feel like a kid. And it's
Mm.
like it's brought up this glow and this natural excitement that we haven't gotten from any other types of industries or companies. And finding that thing, and it all connects back to things that he had done earlier in his high school and college years. So if you really think about what you're connected to in life, what you do outside of the scope of work, and see if you can insert that into some of the companies you're targeting. It can be really eye-opening and a refreshing experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Well, and that's why we do what we do and why we call the company Shine at Work and why this podcast is called Shine at Work, because you actually do literally like kind of glow a little bit when you get excited about something, whether you literally glow and maybe that's not your personality, but like you feel your energy rise. You see that excitement in someone when they're truly passionate about something. And that comes through not just as a human in the work that you do, but in those interviews and in those cover letters. Sometimes we have clients that say, I actually care less about the company and it's more about figuring what role I want to do. I
Mhm.
used to be in this kind of role and I think I want to make a change, or I really love what I do and I don't want to change that. So, like, I know I want to search for this kind of role. So, while we put company as step one, it could also be figuring out the roles you want to target and why. So, one and two can kind of be flipped. But how do people start to think about the roles if they aren't certain about what role they want to do next?
Just do a little bit of a meditation on where you've been and what you've done up to that point,
Mm.
and start building out sort of a pros and cons list of what you've really enjoyed, like what was impactful in your past experiences, and really start to dissect that of, what was the goal of the work that you were doing? Who were you cross functionally working with in that position? And start to really dissect the experiences that were particularly rewarding for you in your past roles, and understand what that is, and then see how you can apply that to whatever your next step is. But really, the answers a lot of times can be there, and you could have been in the role that you're looking for in some form or fashion, or the right focus that, for whatever reason your career took you away from that. But start to dive into those past experiences and really ask yourself, why did I enjoy that? Why was that so impactful, or did that resonate with me? And then how do I apply that moving forward?
Yeah, the why is so important because it's easy to say, oh, I loved working on that project.
Hmm.
But if you don't kind of take it to the next level of like, oh, I really enjoyed working on that project because I got to work with this different department, or I had the chance to use this skill that I didn't usually do, or I got to learn this industry differently. That's actually what's important, not the project itself. And so when you sort of take it to the
Hmm.
next level, that's when you really start getting to the crux of it. I think the other thing, and we talked about this actually in the workshop we led in April, is that it's also this combination of, and like this, I don't know, Venn diagram or whatever, of what you enjoy doing and what you're good at, because there are things you might be good
Hmm.
at that you actually don't enjoy doing. So where do
Sure.
those two things overlap? And that can make a big difference.
Yep, absolutely. But again, it's asking yourself that why question is so important, and putting a little bit of color into what actually resonated with you, dissect that, and then, you know, you can sort of build and construct what your next position is based off those positives from your past.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we talk about these things today, we're doing this in a certain order on purpose. Like I said, company and role, maybe you could flip back and forth depending on sort of where you are in your career, sort of where you are in your journey. But you need to do those two things first, because now when you get to step number three, which is getting your resume and LinkedIn updated in a way that positions you for those roles, it's the second part of that sentence that makes it number three. I can sit down and update a resume today, but I don't have the context of who I'm
Mhm.
targeting and who I'm trying to tell my story to with that resume. So it'll just be a bunch of bullets. You need to know what kind of companies or what kind of roles you're targeting in order to update your resume and your LinkedIn in a way that's actually going to get you the attention of those companies and roles.
Yeah, 1,000%. I like the way you sort of piece that together, because if you go and you look at the companies and you look at the types of roles and you kind of figure that out, you can actually start to work backwards from,
Mm,
take a look at what some of the job postings are, the job descriptions that these companies have or these roles are out there, and understand the points, or what they're highlighting as being important to the role. And then you can look and massage that into your resume. But you have to have the context of what your target is,
yeah.
to really start to work backwards from that and piece together how you're telling your narrative, and where you can, um, how you can really share what your transferable experience is when you understand what they're looking for too on the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is going to tie into our next point here in a second, which I'll get to, but I want to do a sidebar quickly.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on always updating your resume or your LinkedIn with things as they happen as well? So we work with a couple of clients who haven't job searched in a while. And all of a sudden they're like, I don't know, what did I do in my job? I don't know. Like, I can't even remember what I did yesterday, let alone a couple of
Mhm.
years ago. What value is there in either updating LinkedIn here and there or having a Word doc where you're like dumping stuff into a resume that maybe you're not putting any, like you're not putting out anywhere, but when you get to these stories, it's there? Or is that not helpful because I'm supposed to be positioning it with what I'm trying to look for?
I think it's actually a great idea to have a running doc of
Mhm.
sort of things that you've owned or things that you look at as a compliment, accomplishments, or what you've achieved in your role. And just
Mhm.
like I've done it in roles where I'll have my notes open on my computer and just kind of have this one tab that lives there where I'll toss little things in there, whether it was something to do with managing a team or something new that I've taken on or working with a new cross-functional partner. But yes, 1,000%, like have a space where that information lives, because as we talk about a lot with clients, like it's so, and that's why the interview process can be really tough, is surfacing these things that you haven't thought about in a while, keep them top of mind. And then as you do go through and you look at jobs, you can have sort of your core resume based on job descriptions that you're seeing out there and what you've learned from doing a little bit of research. And then you can sort of take those tidbits and add them in
Mhm.
where necessary or where you feel like you can really leverage them based on something in a particular job description.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah. And it's so funny because, you and I are on LinkedIn all the time because of what we do, but other people aren't. And so, what I always tell people about LinkedIn is have it be authentic for you. If
Mhm.
posting all the time doesn't feel right for you, or if, updating with different awards or skills or whatever doesn't feel right to you, that's fine. Just make sure it still represents who you are in the market. So, if a
Mhm.
recruiter came across your profile, it's not disingenuous or it doesn't conflict with what you've been doing. So, if you haven't updated it, in a couple of jobs, go ahead and update it so at least has your current job in there. Or if you just got a new certification in something, like throw it out there. It just continues to show the market that you're doing things, even if you aren't actively looking for right now.
Yeah, 1,000%. And from the perspective of being a recruiter and going out there and digging through, hundreds of profiles, there's something to be said for a profile that's updated and current. It just shows that someone is engaged with the LinkedIn
Mm,
platform, where, you're playing a numbers game as a recruiter. And it's like, okay, if I take the time to write this person an intentional note because I think they're interesting for a position, are they going to get back to me? And
mm.
a lot of times you're throwing things out there, but when you see that people are updating their LinkedIn and the stuff looks or the content on there looks fairly current, it's just an extra little motivation for someone to reach out to you too. So it's definitely a good idea, just to, you don't have to put everything you've done on there, but just make sure it's current up to a point, and it'll help a little bit with engagement numbers.
I kind of think that might be your peek behind the curtain, my friend. You'll have to
I kn-
remember that.
do you know that I was going to save that, and then I was like, I better share it now. But I was going to hold on to that one, but
All right. Well, I will.
I've given my peek behind the curtain.
I was gonna say we'll create space at the end to remind people what that was.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a storyteller. I like continuing to build this up. So we've identified the companies and the roles you want to target. You now have this beautiful resume and LinkedIn profile that supports why they should be considering you for that. Now we're going to start getting your story together, or the way you like to tell it, their narrative. So how do people start to form that? Is that an elevator pitch? Is that just how I'm going to answer certain questions? Like, how do I figure out what my story is?
The first step is really just understanding um, where you've been and what has led up to where you are now,
Mm,
and why you're taking a step in the right direction. So that sounds pretty simple, but it's more so just going through and again really taking some time to just sit and think through what your past experiences have been, why you moved into different roles, what you learned in new different roles, what challenges were there, and just start to familiarize yourself with these things that you haven't thought about in so long, and you'll begin to see there's a thread there of what your narrative is, of what's sort of been the guiding hand in your career. And that's what you're going to want to, I think, probably the most important part of the narrative is being able to share and talk about that in interviews. It's going to come up in your recruiter phone screen. The hiring manager is going to chat with you about it. Your, you know, cross-functional partners that you meet with are going to want to understand sort of what your path has been and what's led you to being so excited about joining the new company or the new role. So it's really the exercise of, especially everything else, it can be tough to go through and redo your resume and update your LinkedIn, but just to take some time to like think about those past experiences and what led to each one and what you've learned and what the pros and cons were will be super helpful in just putting that narrative on the tip of your tongue when you go into conversations and when it's going to matter the most.
Yeah, and I think that is so important because as you do that ahead of time, that way you're not tripped up in the moment.
Hmm.
I don't want to say you have it's you only get one time to make the first impression or whatever, but you're not going to get a lot of time with people in the beginning. And so you want to make sure you're really leaning in and adding a lot of value up front, whether that's a networking conversation, which we'll talk about here in a second, or those first few interviews. There's a quick sort of decision that's being made on the other side because they have so many candidates they're trying to get through. So
Yeah.
being ready to tell that story and honestly being ready to tell part of the story that is going to come up. So I'm working with someone right now who, was quite honestly let go because of performance. It just wasn't the right role for her. And so we've been talking about how am I going to tell that part of my story? Because it's going to come up because there's part of
Hmm.
a resume that has a short stint on it. So, being ready for that because don't hide from it because it's going to come up. That's part of your story too.
Yeah, absolutely. And in those circumstances, it's all about talking about what the challenge was and then what you
Mhm.
learned from that experience and being able to your point, and why I'm saying, really think about these things so you can put them on the tip of your tongue, but also make it a concise message where you're
Mm.
not fumbling around. Um, think about it enough where you can kind of put it into a clean 3 to 5 sentences, and really be familiar with what brought you to that point, and what the learning lessons were along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can share a story. A couple of years ago, I had a networking call that actually was a little bit more of an interview-ish kind of situation, which I didn't realize. And so I
Mm,
was totally unprepared and I definitely bumbled through it and the whole thing. And I actually said at the end, like, hey, I'm actually not looking for a new job. So if this was more of an interview, like this isn't the right conversation to be having. But it just shows that even someone who talks all the time, literally, and talked about my career and like what I do in that moment, I wasn't prepared. And so I fumbled. And in theory, I should know how to do that because I do it all the time.
I've been in the same situation, where I thought it was just a networking call and it was an interview, and I totally bombed it because I wasn't prepared or hadn't, had been in a role for 4 years and hadn't done the mental sort of legwork to go back and think about, okay, this is all that I've sort of accomplished here. This is because it can all just seem like head down, the, the building is burning and you're just
Yeah.
trying to get from one thing to the next. But having that time to sort of sit back and meditate on it and thinking through the process. And something else that's can be super helpful that work with clients on is, a lot of times, even if you don't get them in this particular fashion, behavioral interview questions are
Mm.
usually questions that are geared towards you, um, really steer you away from yes or no and have you share anecdotes about your past experience. There's a lots of lists out there of like, 30 top behavioral questions that is a good thing that I have clients start practicing, even if we're, 5 steps away from even applying to a position or interviewing, because they get you thinking about that narrative. So if just the
Mm.
meditation process of like thinking through the past and what your narrative is a little tough for you, if you practice some of those questions, that can really surface some past experiences for you, and start to piece that narrative together as well.
Yeah. I love it. And a lot of behavioral questions, it's all about storytelling. So it
Hmm.
directly ties into that.
Yep.
All right. So step number 5 to kick off your job search is start networking. start early because then you'll be more relationship building. You'll be able to ask a lot of good questions. You're going to reach out to 10 people, three may respond. So start networking early, but when you have your story and everything ready, so that when you get the yes, you can have a good conversation. You have a resume to share with them. They'll look you up on LinkedIn and your profile is up to date. Whether it's networking, like cold networking or warm networking within people you already know, or as a follow up to an application, even though we're not talking about an application quite yet, how do people start networking who don't do it normally? Like you and I reach out to people all the time, but if I'm not comfortable with that or I'm not used to it, what do I need to do to start networking?
A really easy first step that I found in working with people and that I've done in my own experiences is that when you're at these inflection points, do a little bit of LinkedIn maintenance.
Mm,
So if you just sit back, maybe write down on a piece of paper, like, okay, these are all the companies that I've worked for. These are all the people that I worked with on a team or that were my cross-functional partners, or there was a consultancy that came in that I worked with for a few weeks. Go through that and build that out. And just first step, make sure you're connected with all of them on LinkedIn. It's those people that are you already have an experience with. It's warm, and you don't even have to send a note. It's like a baby step of send them an invite on LinkedIn, and just make sure that you first everyone that's available for you, that low hanging fruit, you're connected with them on LinkedIn. And then like as you go through and you start to look at companies, you can see that like, oh, this person works there, or they've got a second connection. Maybe it's worth reaching out or seeing if they can introduce me. But start with the baby step of just making sure every single person that you can think of that you've worked from with in the past has an invite from you, or you're connected to them in some way on LinkedIn.
and I think that's a great way to start too, because it's a less intimidating way to start.
Mhm.
Again, if you're not used to doing this stuff, finding a friend of a friend or, reaching out to someone you haven't talked to in like 20 years or whatever, it feels more intimidating. But if you start with the people, like you said, you've worked with, you went to school with, you're in a group with, like you're on a board of something, or maybe you're not part of a board, but you volunteer somewhere, like those are the easy places to start. And then you can start the conversation after that of, starting to think about my career, or I'm starting to think about what's next in my career. Would love to hear your experiences, or I've always enjoyed working with you, would love to kind of get your thoughts on something. I mean, that's literally how I got the job at Order Groove. I reached out to a mentor person that I actually used to work with a lot, and said, hey, I'm thinking about making this move, what do you think? She said, I think it's great, you should think about coming here and doing it. And
Mhm.
conversation 7 years later, here I am. So
Yep.
you just never know, like, where that's gonna lead.
Yeah, and it can be again, if it's those people that you already have some sort of relationship with, make sure you're connected, and then it's all about, hey, I see, it's been a while since we chatted, but you're here. Like, I'm really interested in that company. Would love to just hear a little bit about your experience. They've had some positions pop up that I might be interested in applying to. Curious how you feel about the culture, what your journey has been
Mm.
there. There's all these warm introductions where you can start to do some informational conversations, so just start with what you have, and it'll expand from there.
Yeah, and one final point to that is a couple of clients ask us, "So what's my ask in those conversations?"
Mhm.
Honestly, the ask is just to learn. "I wanna hear
Yep.
about your experiences, I'm interested in your company, you're in a role that I'm considering. I always respected you, would love just to hear your perspective and your story." Like, that's all you're asked is to begin with.
I usually tell people to come from the perspective of like, this is a pretty important decision. So I'm measuring,
Mm.
product and cultures of companies. So I'd really just like to learn a little bit about your experience. And then you can always close it out because most of these companies have some sort of referral policy where an employee will get some sort of benefit for helping someone apply to a position from their network if they get the position. So you can always close it out with, if I see anything pop up there, do you have a referral program? Is there an easy way that we might be able to leverage this relationship? Something of that nature, and
Mm.
just
Mhm.
ask them if there's something where companies will have, here's my referral link. So if you apply to any role using this, it automatically ties to me. There's these things built in. So you don't necessarily have to have an ask, but just informationally ask about what their referral program is too. And generally they'll probably be happy to share that with you.
And then say, thank you. How can I help you? Like that's
Hmm.
literally a nice way to
Love that.
round it out too is, and they may say, oh, nothing. It's just good to chat with you or whatever, but you never know. But it just sort of shows like, I want this to be a relationship. This was not just, me coming to you. So that's just a nice way to wrap it up too.
Yep. 1000%.
Alrighty. So the 5 things we talked about today, and this is just to kick off the job search because now you have to apply and interview and do all the things. But just to get started is identify the companies you want to target and why, identify the roles you want to target and why, then update your resume and LinkedIn to make sure that it really positions you for those roles and companies you're targeting. Get your story and narrative locked down so you know how you're going to talk to folks and the story that's now behind that resume, and then start talking to people, start networking, do it as a follow up to an application, reach out to people and just get yourself out there because you never know where it's going to be. And the final thing, also, which we should have talked about with networking, is it doesn't have to be within your work world. Like your
Hmm.
neighbor could work with someone who da da da. So next time you're all hanging out, check in the mail, mention that you're doing something because you literally never know where it may come from.
Absolutely. I love that one.
All right, so peek behind the curtain. I will go first so that you can end on your really strong one. So one thing that I wanted to call out is, we are talking about a company's mission and some of those things. A couple of people have talked to us about culture, and that can mean so many different things. But do they have a really strong DE and IB program, and is equity and belonging actually important to them? And how do you suss that out as part of their culture? Do they care about work-life balance? Are they allowing for flexibility with remote work? Like, what is it about a culture that's really important to you? And then you can look for that. You mentioned like different top companies things. You can even look for top companies for working moms or that kind of stuff. So figure out what's important to you within the culture of a company. And you can also search for that too.
Love it. What's mine? Um, I think one good thing we've talked about this in past podcasts, but just to put it here in this conversation, one really easy way to network as well is lean into your background and your education and alumni. So those don't need to be people that you actually know. To give you like an example, what will happen all the time working internally as a recruiter is, oh, someone reached out to me that went to Cornell as well. They are really interested in the company. They asked me for like a 10-minute informational conversation about my experience here. And it sounds like they might be good for a role, and I get a new resume. So look at companies that you're interested in, see if there's any sort of alumni connection. No one that you need to know. You just have, both went to the same university, and that can be a really warm intro of like, hey, would love if you had 10 minutes just to learn a little bit more about your experience at this particular company. But it's a way to start to break the mold out of people that you actually know. And again, people, especially alumni, are always happy to have a quick conversation. And then, if they've got that referral angle or program too, that's helpful for them too. So
I love that. And there's also this like warmth that comes with that of like, yeah, we both went to Elon or we both went to
mhm,
Villanova. Yes, of course I want to talk to you. Even if you went there, 2 years ago and I was
doesn't
not there
matter.
2 years ago, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. There can be a 5-year gap, there could be
Yeah.
a 10-year gap. That common ground,
Yeah.
just speaking from experience, it happens all the
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
people are pretty open to having those conversations. And then you just never know. You either learn something that might not be interesting for you, or you might have a warm lead into a
Yeah.
place that might have some positions that pop up that might be interesting for you.
I love it. Well, as always, I hope this was really helpful for folks. We really wanted to kind of condense it as like, okay, what are some clear action items that I can take if I'm going to start a job search, especially because we're recording this at the end of September. You still have a few months, a few really pivotal, good, actionable months to find a job before the end of the year, but you got to start. And so hopefully this kind of gets you going. And by the way, we always talk about, we hope this helps you, the person listening to this, but share this with a friend. I just had someone tell me that their friend shared an episode that really spoke to something they were talking about. So if you know someone who's thinking about starting a job search, you can always share it with someone as well, and maybe it will inspire them too. So Dan, thank you as always for your amazing, amazing insight.
Great to see you, my friend. Good
You too.
conversation. Looking forward to the next.
I got it. Number 100. Here we come.
Woo!
I'm going to be like Oprah. You get an episode. You get an episode. All right, everyone. Thank you
Let's not
so
do that.
much. And this is why we're only going to start counting when Dan starts, because he calls me out on my shit all the time. He's like, no, we're not doing that. All right,
Uh,
everyone. Thank you for everything. Have a great week. Bye, my friend. Thank you so much for listening to the Shine at Work podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video versions of our episodes. To learn more about how you can work with Dan and I to make your next big career move, go to our website, shineatwork.net, or follow us on Instagram at shine_at_work. See you at the next episode.